Europe just won the Ryder Cup on American soil, and the celebration barely lasted an hour before it turned into something else entirely. Rory McIlroy stood in that winning press conference and called out the fans who spent 3 straight days targeting him. And it wasn't just him saying it. His own teammates backed him up on camera. A rival American player admitted he felt sorry for what McIlroy went through, and within days, the president of the PGA of America was forced to personally apologize. This isn't speculation. This is what actually happened at Bethpage Black, in their own words, and why it's still shaping how the next Ryder Cup gets planned. Here's the setup nobody outside golf fully understood going in. Bethpage Black in New York was supposed to be the loudest, most hostile Ryder Cup environment American golf had ever built. That was the plan from the start. Colin Morikawa himself had called for chaos on the eve of the tournament, and the home crowd was expected to overwhelm the European team from the first tee.
For one day, it worked exactly as designed. Then Europe caught fire, and by the end of the first day, they led by 3 points. That's when the atmosphere stopped being home team energy and turned into something aimed almost entirely at one man. Rory McIlroy became, in the words of multiple outlets covering the event, the crowd's #1 target. He'd already missed a costly putt at the 2024 US Open, and fans brought it up relentlessly. They mocked his height, they mocked his Irish heritage. And then it moved past McIlroy himself. It didn't stop at the ropes. It reached his wife. Erica Stoll McIlroy walked the course for 2 days next to her husband and absorbed abuse that his own playing partner Shane Lowry later called astonishing. A beer was thrown in her direction during Saturday's 4-ball matches. On Friday, a group of fans chanted an expletive-laced insult at McIlroy while his image was up on the video screen, loud enough that the event's own master of ceremonies led the chant into a live microphone. She resigned from that role the very next day.
By Saturday afternoon, the situation around McIlroy's match had escalated enough that police officers with dogs were stationed along the ropes for crowd control. Shane Lowry, his playing partner that day, effectively became a bodyguard between his friend's family and the gallery, stepping in whenever things got too loud or too personal. It was, by more than one account, a scene that had never really played out at a Ryder Cup before, at least not at this scale. What made it stranger is that McIlroy himself pointed out the crowd wasn't just supporting the home team, it was actively hunting the opposing team's best player instead. He noted afterward that he barely heard the crowd cheering for Scottie Scheffler, the American world #1, but heard plenty directed against him. That distinction matters because it's the difference between a loud home crowd doing its job and a crowd that decided one specific opponent was the target for 3 straight days. That's the setup. That's what set the stage for everything McIlroy and his teammates said once the trophy was actually in their hands. That's coming up.
Here's the specific moment that turned into the most replayed clip of the entire week. On Saturday morning during the foursomes match, a fan yelled at McIlroy that he wasn't that good. McIlroy stepped off the shot, turned toward the crowd, and told them to be quiet, using language that made it very clear he'd had enough. Then he walked back up, composed himself, and knocked his approach shot to within 3 feet of the pin to help set up the clinching point. At the winner's press conference afterward, a reporter asked how satisfying that moment felt. McIlroy didn't dodge it. He confirmed it felt exactly as good as it looked, and the room around him, his own teammates included, laughed along with him. But the tone shifted fast once the questions moved from the shot itself to the week as a whole. McIlroy stopped joking. He told the room plainly that this should not be what's considered acceptable at a Ryder Cup, and that Europe's own players would be making sure their fans understood, 2 years from now in Ireland, that this kind of behavior doesn't get repeated.
This is where it stops being one player's complaint and became something the American team couldn't ignore either. Justin Thomas, paired against McIlroy and Shane Lowry that same Saturday, stood in his own team's press conference afterward and admitted there were genuinely nasty things said from the crowd. He and his partner Cameron Young had told Lowry and McIlroy directly, the day before it even ended, that they felt for them. Thomas said he wished the atmosphere had given the Europeans something to cheer for instead of something to cheer against. That's a member of Team USA in the losing locker room, choosing to publicly side with the opposing team's account of the week. Shane Lowry, who played every minute of that Saturday match next to Erica McIlroy, described the abuse directed at her as astonishing and said the composure she showed while supporting her husband and her team was something else entirely. There's an odd detail in Thomas's own week that shows how strange the atmosphere had gotten. He found himself trying to do 2 contradictory jobs on the same golf course, hyping up the American crowd to support his own team, while also trying to quiet them down enough that his opponents could actually play their shots without distraction. Thomas later said he didn't
think anyone's physical safety was genuinely at risk, but added that words hurt too, which is not the kind of line a player says about the environment his own fans created, unless something had clearly gone wrong. McIlroy made a related point that cut a little deeper than a simple complaint about noise. He said it felt strange that the home fans seemed more interested in going after an opponent than actually supporting their own guy. If people are going to show up, he said, the better use of that energy is supporting your own players, not attacking someone else's. 6 previous Ryder Cups, 6 times McIlroy had played this event before 2025. He said afterward this was the first time he'd ever experienced anything like the abuse he faced that week. Matt Fitzpatrick went further than most, publicly criticizing comments made by an American golf official who initially brushed off the fan behavior instead of condemning it. Fitzpatrick called those comments offensive to European fans, and he wasn't alone. Fellow European player Tyrrell Hatton pushed back publicly as well. That's 2 players from the winning team, on the record criticizing the losing side's own leadership instead of just celebrating the trophy. That single moment turned a golf story into a governance story, and it's the part that had actual consequences.
Days after the trophy was handed over, PGA of America President Don Ray Jr. sent an internal message that leaked, and it wasn't a defense of the week's atmosphere. It was an apology. He acknowledged that fans crossed the line and confirmed that CEO Derek Sprague had personally apologized to Rory and Erica McIlroy and to the entire European Ryder Cup team on behalf of the organization. Ray admitted his own earlier comments during the event had reflected poorly on the PGA of America and apologized for those too. Golf has had rowdy Ryder Cups before. This is the first time in recent memory the host organization's president has had to personally apologize to the winning team's best player, in writing, days after the trophy left the country. Sprague was blunt about why McIlroy became the focus. He said Rory may have been targeted specifically because of how good he is, and that regardless of the reason, the entire European team shouldn't have been subjected to what happened. That's not spin from a European broadcaster. That's the American governing body's own CEO, on record.
There's a line in Ria's message worth sitting with. He wrote that what makes the sport great is that it owns its mistakes, and that the organization was owning this one. That's a fairly rare thing for a governing body to put in writing this bluntly, this fast, after a win of this size. Most organizations wait out the news cycle. The PGA of America instead sent a written apology within days, while the story was still the top item in golf coverage, not months later when nobody was watching anymore. It's also worth remembering what was actually on the line here. Ireland hosts the next Ryder Cup in 2027 at Adair Manor, with Europe defending back-to-back-to-back wins if they can pull it off. McIlroy already said his side plans to remind their own fans not to repeat what happened at Bethpage. That's a genuinely unusual thing to hear a player promise in the afterglow of a win. Not just gratitude, a warning to his own crowd 2 years in advance.
On the eve of the tournament, before a single ball had been struck, American player Colin Morikawa was the one who publicly called for chaos from the home crowd. He wanted an intimidating, overwhelming atmosphere aimed at rattling the European team. In a lot of ways, he got exactly what he asked for. The problem is that chaos doesn't stay aimed at the scoreboard. It found a specific player instead of a specific team. It found that player's wife, and it ended with the host organization's own president apologizing in writing. That's the irony sitting underneath this entire story. The crowd behavior wasn't really a random breakdown. It was the predictable result of a strategy that got exactly the intensity it was hoping for, just pointed in a direction nobody wanted to own afterward.
Here's the complete picture, in the words of the people who were actually there. McIlroy said the standard fell short of what golf should allow. Justin Thomas, playing for the other team, said the same thing in his own press conference. Shane Lowry described what McIlroy's wife endured as astonishing. And the PGA of America's own president ended up apologizing in writing, confirming Sprague's view that no one on that team should have gone through what they did. Europe walks away with the trophy and the moral high ground in the same week. McIlroy already said his side will be reminding their own fans in Ireland in 2027 not to repeat it. Whether American golf actually changes anything before then is the real open question. It's worth remembering how rare this alignment actually is. Golf doesn't usually get this kind of agreement across team lines. Players protect their own locker rooms, officials protect their own events, and the losing side rarely hands the winning side extra ammunition in public. Here, an American player validated a European player's complaint the same weekend it happened, and the American governing body validated it again in writing less than a week later. When 3 separate parties with 3 separate incentives all land on the same conclusion, that's usually a sign the original complaint wasn't an exaggeration.
None of this erases what Europe pulled off on the course. A 15-13 win, their sixth in the last 8 contests, cements this era as one-sided in a way American golf still hasn't solved. But for once, the story leaving Bethpage wasn't only about the scoreboard. So here's where it lands. The best player on the winning team, a rival from the losing team, and the head of the hosting organization all ended up agreeing on the same thing that week. It went too far. Drop a comment. Do you think the PGA of America does enough to fix this before Ireland in 2027? Or does this exact scene repeat itself the next time the Ryder Cup lands on American soil? And when Europe hosts in 2027, remember McIlroy's own promise to his home fans. Because if the roles reverse and Europe's crowd crosses the same line, this exact conversation happens all over again, just in the other direction.